Welcome to They Are Waiting for Us from Forbes Books, the podcast that explores how education can transform lives and communities, featuring conversations with change agents who are making a difference in education, from parents and advocates to teachers and leaders. Here's Dr. Lisa Andrew.
Welcome back to my conversation with Dr. Derek Mitchell, the CEO of Partners in School Innovation. We've been discussing his journey through education, from his time as a young student to leading an organization that helps educators build their capacity to serve students from historically marginalized communities. Now, Derek, the recent Supreme Court ruling about affirmative action seems to contradict the need to address race. If you had an audience with the Supreme Court, what would you say?
I would say we've played this tune before. The Plessy versus Ferguson decision. It's the same decision. Just when things are beginning to look bright for social justice in our country, we go through these periods of retraction, reversion, and that decision led to the Jim Crow era. And so the question is, what is this decision going to lead to? How far back are we going to have to go? What this essentially says is that the wounds, cultural, social, opportunistic wounds that we as an overall society are still suffering from have no purchase in the possibilities of our lives going forward. And that simply is not true. In fact, the case that the Supreme Court didn't take a couple weeks before illustrates that when they pushed back against the maps, the election maps. Right. So think about it for a minute. If, with one legislature creating election maps that disenfranchise the Black people, right? And then the next week you say affirmative action is not necessary. I mean, the two choices that they make no sense with each other. And so I would say we've been through this before. We've experienced this when we reach a point where there is enough momentum for positive, continuous change. And there's enough blowback against that change. The folks who were privileged before feeling now as if they are no longer the privileged, bringing cases, whether they're authentic or not, because, some of these cases aren't terribly authentic, that lead to a decision by the Supreme Court that threatened to kind of roll back decades of progress.
Yes, yes.
Luckily, there's been enough work, in broader communities, the college community specifically because of this case, around the value of a diverse student population, and around different ways that we can actually preserve the diversity in student populations. Luckily, California has we're 20 years in, right, on this, and so we found ways to go most of the way back. But imagine if we didn't have to do that. Imagine if we hadn't, eliminated affirmative action in California. How much more diverse our graduate schools and, law schools and medical schools would be today. We literally just got back to the percentages we had in the late 90s, just like 2 years ago.
Right.
And it's still underrepresented.
Yes.
Right. Against the population of the state. So to me, the challenge is it's less about racial equity. In this case, it's more directly about racism and the fact that, those of us who are progressives in the world often don't plan for opposition. We feel like we just can explain it well enough. Everyone would be on our side because, of course, you should meet people where they are and serve them based upon, their, what they need. But the truth of the matter is there are people out there who want to preserve the best seats in the best schools and the best jobs in the best companies for just folks who look like them.
Yes. And they've always been there. I mean, I don't think it's like now there's all of a sudden this new, bigger group of folks that are there. I think they have found a voice that is reinforced. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we think, oh, there's now this whole new group of people that have come forward. I think they've always been there. They just now are being much more vocal.
Yeah,
And
I think they have always been there, and they will always be there. The question is, do we plan for them or not?
right. Right.
Do we arm ourselves against their arguments? Do we,
Right.
create the tools and the communication tools and the strategies to mitigate, all of their challenges? This whole issue around critical race theory, for instance, and I mean, it's just an insane set of blowback. The idea that books are being banned because they have equity in them
Right.
is just nonsense. And if we had a more proactive strategy to make sure people really understood what we're talking about, and enrolling them into the overall ideas, I think we would be in a better situation. I'll give you an example. In my home district, there was a lot of community engagement around this question about equity versus excellence, as if the two are in opposition. They're not in opposition, right? In fact, you can't get one without the other. And so helping a parent understand, it's just parents felt like, the school district is not challenging their kid in order to make rooms for other kids, and didn't believe equity was something that should happen. And I asked if he had a definition of equity, and he didn't. And I'm like, well, how many children do you have? He told me he has 3. Like, did you ever get tutoring for your kids? He goes, my daughter, she needed tutoring in math. I said, so you got her tutoring in math? He's like, yeah. Why didn't you get tutoring for all your kids? Because there you spent money to resource her. What about the others? Well, they didn't need it.
Right.
You implemented an equity strategy. You saw a gap, you resourced it, and now she's doing well, right? He nodded. Like, that's what equity is. That's all it is, right? Is resourcing need and not power.
Right. People hear the word equity and they think, what are you taking away from me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it has to be that something, there's this scarcity mindset that there's only so much. There's only so much. So if you're going to give extra to this person, then something's going to come away from my plate. And we've been taught that it's part of the system. This is part of how we oppress folks. And when we shift to an abundance, when we shift to there's more than enough, I'm going to get equity means I'm going to get what I need to succeed, and you will get what you need to succeed. And now we're kind of back to where we started with meeting you where you're at. That's the message. There's abundance. There's enough for everyone. It doesn't mean that something's going to come away from you.
Scarcity is another one of those tropes.
Yeah.
That we believe that simply is not true.
Well, and it's for control.
All kids are ready at a certain level. No, we have more than we need. The question is, how is it distributed? That's the question. I mean, one school has 4 literacy coaches, another one doesn't have books. This is the same district.
Well, on that vein, because now you led right into, let's talk about our schools. Let's talk about getting a little bit more specific. So I'm often asked why things aren't getting better in our schools. Why is African American or Latino student achievement not improving? The government is pouring so much money into our system. What's going on? Why aren't things getting better? How would you answer that question?
They are getting better. And it's pretty clear that they're getting better. If you look at the data pre-COVID, you got pretty consistent improvement in literacy and mathematics over the course of the last 50 years. With, the students of color improving a little bit faster than the others, not having caught up yet. And so things are getting better. But here's what folks don't recognize. If you ask your parents who were in school in the 50s, they'll tell you that when a young woman got pregnant, she disappeared. She just disappeared. Kids with special needs, they weren't in school. Kids who didn't speak English weren't in school. A lot of kids were actually working in fields. The poorest kids, they weren't actually in school. So over the course of the following 30 years, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, we were widening the band of who schools serve, increasing the number of students with special needs going to school, increasing the number of students who speak a language other than English going to school, increasing the number of kids who are impoverished, showing up at school, having kindergarten, and coming to school. And what you don't see in those data is that the population that our public schools are serving is getting wider and wider, more and more inclusive. over the course of those. And on top of that, the results improved, right? So the population got more inclusive and the results incrementally improved.
I think there's a lot of contradiction to that because recent publications would say that things are not improving. If you look at student achievement is not improving. That even if
you're talking about now post pandemic, I get that. I think it's a different question. What I'm suggesting is that folks who are looking at this moment and saying things are awful are discounting decades of things actually getting incrementally better. And the data are pretty clear about that. Just go look at NAEP and look at other things. You'll see the trend and how it was going. And the three things that I think are why we aren't improving more dramatically than incrementally are also problems now. So let me share what those are. The first is that we're only investing in the communities that actually have wealth and power significantly right now. And by investing, I mean real, consistent, persistent investments. Even when you think about the dollars that are going for school improvement grants and other such things, you have them for a few years and you don't. I had this conversation with the state legislature member in California who was shocked at how under the prior set of rules around school improvement grants, that once the schools showed improvement, they lost the grants. Isn't that the nuttiest thing known to man? So the problem was you didn't have the resources you needed to better meet kids' needs. Here are those resources. You're doing better now. Let us take them away. That's nonsense. But that doesn't happen for the families and the communities who have wealth in this country. It doesn't happen for the communities who are primarily middle class and upper middle class and whites in this country. The persistent investing in the building a capital, an intellectual capital in these schools that resist the ebbs and flows of funding sources is pretty tremendous. You just need to visit one to see what I'm talking about.
Right?
It's pretty simple. So that's one. We're only investing consistently and powerfully in one particular population. If we decide differently, the issues will be different. Second, we're only valuing what one part of the culture believes is important to know. We still haven't tackled the problem of everything being normed to white men in the 40s. We haven't tackled the question of what else should families and kids and communities who are not, white, what else do they value in education? Why aren't those things being put front and center? What do the community want their kids to know and do? It may very well be the results that we come out of when we ask those questions is a much more diverse, much more interesting set of measures, metrics, and tools societally. And you know me, I'm the data guy. I love literacy. I still think every kid needs to know how to read. I still think every kid needs to be able to master mathematics. I also still think kids need to know something about who they are and who we are as a nation and as a country. Beyond that, I think our schools need to be a great deal more reflective of the values of the communities around them. And until we do that, school feels colonial, right? Because you're sending kids to a place, and you're forced to send them, mind you, right? Where they're learning something that someone else has decided is the stuff that's important for them, right? You have your own ideas, but those don't matter. You may as well be the Catholic Church in that situation. We know what's good for you. We know what's good for your kids. And so that's the second, widening that band, creating a more robust set of content and standards and processes that are actually more reflective of community and responsive to families and community. The third, I think, is the trickier problem. And it's the fact that we have an aging teacher force that still don't represent and reflect the broader community that we are as a nation and as a country. Yes, every teacher can contribute to the learning of every child, and thank God that's true, because I wouldn't be where I am if not for some really awesome white teachers, who are like, don't believe the hype, Derek. But the research is clear about the value of a diverse teaching force, the ways in which they connect more powerfully with students of all kinds and prepare students for a more diverse society that they're facing. I was the only Black teacher in the school I taught at for 3 years. The only one. You wouldn't believe the kind of questions that came to me. But they were kids asking, wondering, because they're hearing things out in there, and they can ask me because I'm the only one they know.
Right.
Imagine all across the country, there's no one they can ask.
Yes. Yes.
And so to me, if we tackle these three issues
Okay.
clearly and powerfully as a society, we could see something more than incremental results.
Okay.
There is a fourth issue that the pandemic illustrated for us, and that's really the mental health needs of kids and families, and of teachers and leaders too.
Right. So in that vein, Michael Bloomberg wrote in the Wall Street Journal that politicians should pay for ignoring America's education crisis. Of those three things, all of those things in education, that both parties are focused on votes instead of solutions, such as tutoring or summer school, or even focus on accountability. So, schools in California continually ask for local control, and you alluded to that, about that schools should focus on what the community thinks is important. So anytime there's any legislators that I talk to, it's about local control. So, students are really waiting for us to show up for them. They're coming every day. Like you said, there's more access to showing up at school than before. So do you think school boards and superintendents should be held more accountable for those 3 or 4 items that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think school boards and superintendents are already incessantly accountable. I really appreciate Brother Bloomberg and everything he's trying to do. But that entire system where this hyper wealthy, have outsized the influence on broad policy and public policy debate, that wouldn't be the case if we were actually publicly investing in our systems appropriately. And so the very thing he's arguing about has created the platform upon which we care about what he thinks.
Right.
To me, it's about tax-based. It's about robust, persistent, consistent public resourcing. It's about what we value as a society. Right now, it doesn't seem really to be public education, and we have to change that.
Agreed.
To me, that's the big issue, and the issue under which all these others flow.
Right.
That being said, you mentioned our policymakers are all about local control here in California. It's local control, but still national standards or state standards or and so how much control do you really have if you don't actually determine what to measure?
Mm-hmm.
We don't determine what's valuable.
Right.
Right.
Right. And here in Santa Clara County, you have a student attending one high school district that gets $10,300 per year for that student. 10 miles away, another school district gets $24,100 per year for that student. That's just because of the zip code. Just because of the zip code is where they're at. To me, that sends a huge message about who's valued and who's going to have access to resources that are going to be able to ensure they get what they need in order to become the workforce of Silicon Valley, become, whatever they want to become. That does lay with the politicians, and that does lay with the policymakers. And
and we even penalize parents for trying to game that structure, for finding addresses so that they can actually put their kid in the system that's resource rich.
Right.
And
then we get upset at them, and you've broken the law, and how dare you? And you're taking, again, the whole scarcity mindset drives that. What
that really means is that some kids are worthy of investment and others are not. That's what that means.
Exactly.
And it's not coincidental that the kids who are less worthy tend to look a certain way, tend to speak more than English.
Right.
And tend to not have intergenerational wealth. That's just coincidence, right?
Right. Well, Derek, before we wrap up, I understand that Partners has recently published something about their work. You want to give a little information about the book on Partners' work and what they have found out?
So Partners published a book recently called Change Agents, Transforming Schools from the Ground Up. It's written by a journalist, Justin Cohen. And what he did was meet with teachers, leaders, superintendents, and partner staff from the last 10 years of our work in different communities where we've gotten great results. And has asked the question, what's underlying all of this, right? How did this really happen? And we talked a lot about while the book was being generated, the need to center the narratives of the teachers and leaders who are taking on the challenge of delivering for poor kids of color across this country. And so the book does that. It does a really good job of humanizing the work of school transformation, of demystifying it, because sometimes different books feel like you just deploy these strategies and create this formula and great results will happen.
Magic, yes.
It's not how it happens. It's really about human interaction and inspiring people and having them work effectively and powerfully together. And that takes, trial and error and a lot of mistakes and a lot of angst and good food, because that's one of the things that came out in the stories, is that the way we use food, in the work is super strategic. And so, the book is on Amazon, and it's doing really well. The idea behind it is that because every single child has within them a myriad of brilliant futures, if they don't accomplish one of them, whose fault is it?
Who's accountable? Who's going to be accountable? Because they're waiting. That's
right. Help them unlock those brilliant futures. And every person in the life of kids can be the one that helps them accomplish what they need to accomplish, to be brilliant, to be great, to be successful, to be fulfilled. We call those people change agents, folks who own the responsibility of helping to amplify the outcomes of others. And the book, sort of talks about how to be one.
Excellent. Well, Derek, if folks wanted to connect with you or find out more about Partners in School Innovation, where would be the best place for them to look?
Coming to our website, partnersinschools.org, would be a good first step, and then calling us. We're here. We only support schools that have a high percentage of poor kids of color, although the strategies and tools that we use are really powerfully useful everywhere. We just feel like most places that need us most are where we're called to be. And so reach out. We'll be more than happy to help.
Great. Well, Derek, thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time to chat.
Thank you. Lisa, it's awesome to see you as always. And we've had great collaboration over the course of the years and hope we have many, many opportunities to do more.
Absolutely. And that wraps up the first episode of They Are Waiting for Us. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe so that you can get notifications when new episodes drop. Also, if you could spare a minute, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a review to help others like yourself discover the show. Thank you, and be well.
This has been They Are Waiting for Us. If you want to learn how to create economic opportunity through equal access to quality education and create an extraordinary learning environment focused on everyone realizing their full potential, go to drlisaandrew.com. They Are Waiting for Us is a production of Forbes Books.